And we are joined in Washington, D.C. now by Fred Bergsten, director of the Peterson Institute for International Economics. And Fred was previously Assistant Secretary for the Treasury for International Affairs. In fact, the Fidelity Investments Worth has ranked him among the top 50 who really moves the markets. And Fred, welcome to the program today. Let's talk about this $1 trillion loan package. I mean, to you, is this a big game changer?
Oh, this is definitely a game changer. The European governments and the world as a whole had been behind the curve of the Greek crisis and associated contagion risks until now. I think they have now gotten ahead of the curve. They've put a convincing package on the table. It's certainly going to buy a good deal of time, and it may even pave the way for a lasting solution to the problem.
Is this a lasting solution, though, Fred? I mean, isn't this kind of similar to the TARP program where people are just calling this pure money printing?
Well, the TARP program, so far at least, seems to have worked. So I wouldn't use that as a negative analogy. The question in Europe is whether Greece can be bailed out or whether it has a national insolvency problem and will have to reschedule its debt still at some point in the future. We can't know the answer to that yet. It depends on how effectively the Greeks are in carrying out their austerity program. As I say, at a minimum, some significant time has been bought to see whether that works out. If it has not, then any rescheduling could still be done in a more orderly way down the road without all the trappings of crisis and the fear of contagion, which was really the reason why this big intervention has been mounted.
Okay, Fred, let me ask you this, because at the beginning of this interview, you said that this really solution might have lasting effects on the markets afterwards. But if we're not guaranteed that Greece is going to get their act together, and what makes you think this is a viable solution here?
There are two problems in Greece. One is whether they will get their act together. So far, the political process has taken decisive steps. There are people rioting in the streets, and we'll have to see if that continues and if the government is resolute and effective in carrying out its program. I think there's a pretty good chance it will be. The bigger question, though, is whether the program, tough as it is adequate. The debt dynamics in the Greek case are pretty bad. The national debt is very high. The interest rates it has to pay will probably stay fairly high. And the question is whether it can, in fact, pay off its debt, service it in an orderly way without, again, facing a crisis at some point down the road and perhaps running short even on the tough austerity measures that have been adopted. We'll simply have to see. The key variable is how the markets react, whether Greece can again borrow at reasonably moderate interest rates. If so, 5% or less, they'll probably be okay. If they have to pay more than that, then the question of a rescheduling may still have to come on the agenda in the future.
Hey, Fred, let me ask you, how big of a test is this bailout package for the eurozone? $1 trillion worth, but according to ECB's president, Jean-Claude Trichet, he hinted that this wasn't exactly a unanimous decision. So do you think there might be strains in the eurozone? And could we possibly, you know, people are pointing to this in the future, see a breakup of the EU?
No, I don't think there's any risk of a breakup of the EU anytime soon. But I do think the crisis raises a fundamental question about the future of the European Union and particularly the eurozone. We've always known that the euro was a halfway house. They have created a common currency, but they do not have a common fiscal policy. They do not have a real economic governance system. They talked about creating an economic and monetary union. They have the monetary union, but not the economic union. What's been exposed now is the problem of having a halfway house. Your currency is not safe and solid unless you can coordinate effectively on fiscal and, in fact, broader economic issues. The question for Europe now is whether this crisis gives them an impetus to get together on the future reforms that are needed to complete the project, or whether it will lead to an outbreak of nationalist reactions that will push them backward. All that in turn depends on whether the political imperative for European Union continues as for the past 50 years.